panel is going to be looking at this the reverse side. We have two U.S. tech companies that are expanding into Asia quite aggressively. The first is Quixey, which has been expanding into India and China. Can everybody hear in the back? Can you hear me in the back? Yeah. Raise your hand. Okay. We're getting our next speakers mic'd up on other different mics so that hopefully you can hear a little bit better in the back. So I was talking about the U.S. outbound story to China and India and other markets in Asia. So besides Quixey, which is really highlighting India and China, we have Path. Dave Morin is here from Path, and Path has been very aggressively going after Indonesia and other markets. So interviewing them is Eric Savitz of Brunswick Group. So Eric, why don't you bring your panelists up here and we'll get them situated. Hi Dave, thanks. Hi Jake, thanks. I read about Quixey for Forbes last week. I interviewed the COO, so if you're interested in more about their story, you can read the column online as well.
Well, thank you. I got the rhyming panelists with Dave Morin and Jake Orrin.
Yeah, let's see. Are they okay with their mics?
I think we're good.
I think we'll make it.
Okay.
Yeah. Is that good?
Yeah, that's good.
Hello.
So let's talk a little bit first about what each of your companies do. Dave, why don't you tell people a little bit about Path? I'm sure a lot of people know about the business, but give us the...
Depends on what country you're in. Sure. So we run a personal social networking platform, and most recently we have broken it out into two separate applications. So we do both social networking through our core app called Path, and then we also have a messenger in market now called Talk. And the core differentiator of Talk is that you can text any business using text messaging, which is pretty cool. And that's what we do.
And Talk is relatively recent, right?
Yeah, it's brand new. And especially the business messaging functionality just rolled out 1 quarter ago, so it's brand new.
Oh, okay, we'll come back to that in a second. Jacob, tell us a little bit about Quixey.
Quixey is a mobile search engine. We specifically focus on discovery of functional tools, so how to find apps better, how to find content and functionality from within apps on your mobile devices and other devices. And we do it globally now.
Great, okay. Dave, talk a little bit about the way that your apps play in the Asian market. You have a substantial group of users in Indonesia and some other places in Asia. Talk a little bit about how that unfolded and whether that was by design or by happenstance.
Sure. So we do about 5 million daily active users. We have about 10 million monthly. And in Asia in particular, we're doing about 450 million moment views a day. So it's a substantially large amount of traffic. And that's up in the last year by order of magnitude. So almost on a yearly basis, our traffic is just increasing a lot in the Asian region, and particularly in Southeast Asia. The question, I guess, was that on purpose? Was it by happenstance? When we started the company, we started it as a global company. We're obviously based here, but we rolled out the products globally. And initially, we had pretty uniform usage across the world. We had a good base here in the United States. We had some usage in Europe, some in Asia, but about 18 months in, we started to see the growth curve in Asia really have the right characteristics. And I spent many years prior to Path helping to build Facebook from about 5 million users to 1 billion users globally. And through that period, I learned a lot about growth, and especially global growth. And one of the things that I learned was that if the numbers look correct in a country, double down and really try to expand and to make it happen in that country. And we saw that happening in Indonesia in particular. And we spent a lot of time studying the market and understanding that, it's one of the fastest growing internet markets. It's one of the largest countries in the world, one of the best democracies. and the economy looks like it's really on the upswing. And so we made the decision to really start to focus in that region because we had the chance to win. And so we've been doing that now for about the last 18 months to 2 years. And it's been pretty successful so far. And it's our primary focus today.
So did you, when you started to see that called a hockey stick growth in that market, did you begin to change the product? Did you adjust the product for the local market? Was it more a matter of how you marketed in market, or was it really about adjusting the product to meet local market needs?
I think that it's hard not to be adjusting the product to the local market when that's where the data is being created in a way. One of my favorite design philosophies is, I call it the get out of the way design philosophy. And the idea is that if users are using your product in a particular way, then help them do more of that. A good concrete example is as we were building out Path, we actually started out with only photos. You could only share photos. And as we were building it out, we realized that people were sharing more than photos. We actually did a whole bunch of primary research and realized that users were actually taking screenshots of various different apps on their phone and then uploading those to their Path. These are things like notes and running maps and,
So they were kind of routing around you.
Yeah, they were hacking the product in a way, right? And there's two ways to interpret that. You could sort of say, well, oh, that's not what I meant for them to do, or you could embrace it and enable them to do more of it, which is why I call it get out of the way. And so we got out of the way. We enabled users to post more than photos, so we expanded from photos to photos and music and check-ins and notes, as well as health-related functionality, and like sleep, when you go to bed, when you wake up. And that really, catapulted the usage. We grew almost, 500% in just a month's time after we launched that version of the product. And really all that was because we, really looked at the data, both quantitative and qualitative. How are people using the product, and then enabled them to do more of that. And so you could call that building the product to that particular market, but really what we were doing was looking at our broad base of users and saying this is what people are doing, and so let's help them do more of that. And so I wouldn't call it necessarily like landing on the ground in Jakarta and figuring out, we're getting to that point now, I will say. We're beginning to do a lot more primary research, not just in places like Jakarta, but Bandung and various different regions in Java and Sumatra and Singapore and around the Southeast Asian region to understand how people are hacking the product to do things we didn't expect, as well as what people want to be able to do. And I think as we invest more and more and more into the market, it requires more and more research.
Jake, talk a little bit about Quixey's relationship with Alibaba. It starts with the fact that they are an investor, a large investor in the company, but you also have a deeper operating relationship with them. Talk a little bit about what you're doing for Alibaba.
So we do a lot of interesting stuff with them. I think the stuff in the market we talk about today is we power app search for their OS platform, as well as our product called Deep Search in their one search box. So the search on their phone actually surfaces deep content within apps on the device. And that's a product that we launched with them in China. And it's been very, very successful, actually.
So what's it like working with them, developing the product together with them? How does that vary from, you have other partners in other markets. How does it change how's the relationship different from working with them in China and working with other partners here?
I think it's obvious to say the culture is different in China than it is in the US. I think one of the things we really liked about, it's okay, I got it. One of the things we really liked about Alibaba from the get-go was their intuition around innovation. They're a very interesting company. They've done a lot of innovation in their own market, and they understand what innovation is all about. And for us, that was very attractive and has created a really great synergy. That said, obviously, there are all types of nuanced differences that we had to overcome in the beginning. Some linguistic, but primarily just around flow and cadence and how things are built and how innovation is done. I think it's done differently in China than it is done in the US. And bringing those two minds together has been actually, I think, a great success for both companies. And it's been very, very cool to be a part of. And as a company, we've embraced I think they've embraced some of our culture, and vice versa. We've learned a little bit from them as well.
Can you talk a little about how that development is different here versus there? That how the work styles are different, or
So, I think when you talk about innovation in the U.S., some of it's very much experimental. We try things out and see what happens, and then we go from there. I think there's sometimes a different level of planning that goes into innovation. In Asia, I think there's different ways of taking risk, and we've learned a lot from basically how they approach things. I think a company like Alibaba has reached such an enormous amount of scale, done so much in their own market, and so much in the Chinese market. We were able to learn a great deal about what's successful there, how people like to innovate, how you can deal with changes in UIs, changes in experiences, and how you change user behavior, which was different. We in the U.S., I think you somehow, it's funny, I think you even have a little more forgiveness in the U.S. sometimes than you do sometimes in the Chinese market, in different ways. And we were able to learn from their processes and kind of bring some of our innovation style to it, and it's created a great experience. I'm not going to get into the details of every meeting, but we have, we do standing meetings twice a week where we kind of go through punch lists of everything that's going on. It's very interesting to see how we approach things. Obviously, their work week's a little longer than ours, but at a startup that isn't much different than our startup work weeks here, is it really? So it's been a lot of fun, and I think it's been a great learning experience for both companies. We have a team now in China full time. They have teams here in the U.S., and we work together with both of those teams.
Now, you also have a presence in India, and recently, in fact, you recently did an acquisition of a team in India. Talk a little bit about your experience there and how doing development in India is different than in China.
I'll start with a little bit of a story. Like you guys, we started as a global company. And I think, interestingly enough, as you look at some of the new generation of startups that are coming out of the Valley, they start off as a global company first. And they realize America is a fantastic market. We all know the dynamics here. But it's not the biggest market. It's not the fastest growing.
85% of the world's internet traffic is outside the United States. Yeah.
And we saw that same evolution, especially when we started looking at mobile phone adoption and how people are accessing the internet today. It's very, very different. And everyone else doesn't live here. So as a company, we started very early saying we knew we wanted to be global. We spent a lot of effort early on, which was kind of expensive, traveling and seeing these markets and trying to develop relationships with partners out there. We obviously gravitated towards India and China as being some of the more powerhouse markets to enter. China being our first play, which was obviously very successful for us. And then we looked at India as that next opportunity. Now, Indian culture and way of doing business is very different. But I'll say, I spent a great deal of time in India, there's a real seed of that Silicon Valley culture I see evolving there. And I'm not sure how it got planted, but it's an amazing thing to see. Meeting with CEOs from Yatra, Flipkart, Snapdeal, these big companies are revolutionizing their own markets. They've got that spark, that innovation that I see it all over the place, but it's something very special and intangible, and it's been very exciting for us to work out there. The acquisition that we did there was actually very successful. Those guys totally mixed with our Silicon Valley culture very, very well. And it was a little bit different than how things were in China, where it was a little bit of a learning curve for both teams to get together. That scrappiness that you feel here in Silicon Valley, I'm sure everyone here has seen that before, was really alive and present when we were there in India. That might just be their smaller company, but I think there's something special going on there that's something we're hoping to be a part of as well.
Dave, are you guys doing development outside the U.S.? Do teams?
Not today. We do have a GM on the ground in Indonesia as of this month. So, but we are not doing development outside the U.S.
Interesting. And when you think about the development of the product, and this goes for both of you, when you think about in the early stages of doing product development, you talk about like 85% of the market's outside the U.S. Do you need to be thinking about that, thinking about your target markets, thinking about where the potential is early on, or is it wiser to focus on, let's start in the U.S. and then we'll try and grow the product outside? How do you think about the right growth path for a company that's just getting into the emergent stages of developing a product?
Are you talking about us, or are you talking about, say, a brand new startup in Silicon Valley?
Yes.
Both.
What's your answer both ways?
Okay. I think that, like I said, for us, we're starting to focus a lot more on primary research in markets. So we will actually send our, directors of product over to markets where we're seeing the right types of growth. We're actually not just seeing the right growth curves in Asia now, but we're actually starting to see some in the Middle East. And we're starting to see, across places where mobile growth is extremely strong. And so, in order to learn how to make a great product, we have to do primary research. And so what we do is we put product managers on the ground, We do qualitative research. We look at quantitative research from our own data, and we use that to inform our design process. But at Path, we're a design-driven company. We do everything through the lens of sort of design first. And so what we try to do is have the highest quality data feeding into that design process in order to start off a new innovation project.
And when you talk about the research that you're doing, are you looking at, is it about the demographics of the user base? Is it about the behavior of the existing user base? Or is it, what kind of things are you looking at?
It's more anthropological. So how are people communicating? How are people doing commerce? For example, in Indonesia, users tend to use Instagram as a mobile storefront, which we would have never guessed, right? People don't use it for photo sharing. They wake up in the morning, they delete all of their photos, and then they go and they take photos of everything that they want to sell that day, and then meticulously organize it in the right order, and then that's their mobile storefront. And they actually close the transactions over messaging apps, so they use Path Talk or they use other apps that are popular in market to do the actual transactions. And even the way that the transaction goes down is really, really fascinating. They don't use, they actually go down to the corner store, they're like a 7-Eleven, and they do a transfer from account to account using an ATM. And in order to confirm the actual transaction, people will take a photo of the ATM and send the photo in order to confirm the transaction. And so how would we know that ever? By just looking at some broad swath of even our own data or somebody else's data or whatever. It would be impossible to understand that kind of a pattern. And so the only way that we can understand a pattern like that is to go into market with product managers and designers and actually have conversations and ask really nuanced questions. How is that? How are you actually paying for that? How are you actually doing these transactions? Or how do you communicate? Why? Asking these like really hard questions and really trying to unearth the real native behavior of the market and finding ways to make that more efficient, to make it more beautiful, to give people better tools. And those are the kinds of questions that we, I guess, are in search of. And every once in a while we come upon something like this where we have this epiphany sort of anthropological experience where we're like, oh, like that's how it works. And then that's like a really strong guiding factor in terms of how we design the product.
Well, Jacob, when you're with the design of Quixey, the design of doing the search, are you thinking about multiple markets, multiple languages? How do you think about approaching that?
We took a little different approach. So we took some risks. We knew we wanted to be global, and we knew that we were going to eventually need to have global teams. So early on, we opened an office in Israel, which was really hard. Being a startup, trying to manage teams in America, teams in a foreign country. We had sales offices in different countries and things, but it was, am I on? I don't know. It was very hard, but we knew if we could get over that hump once, it would serve us immensely, and we did. And as a result, we open offices in China. We have actual development happening in China for the China market. In India, we have development in India for the India market. I won't say it's the easiest path, but we thought about it for a while. We said, we're going to do this. We're going to be global. We've got to figure out a way to be able to work well together, get that same energy, but do it across borders and across time zones. And it was non-trivial. I won't stress that enough. So I warn any startup who wants to try that out, but it was worth it because it gave us such level of knowledge about those markets that we will never have had otherwise. It influences to how we make our core platform, how we make technology choices. I mean, we always knew we were going to be multilingual, so we did a lot of stuff to prepare for that. But that was just the beginning of the iceberg when it comes to understanding design, use cases, how people use their mobile devices. I mean, if we look at how we use our mobile phones here, they started as gaming tools that moved into efficiency tools that moved into primary computing devices. In places like India, it was the primary internet device. I mean, it's just such a different experience. And as Americans, I mean, it sounds, we're incapable of understanding how different that is.
This is a really important point, actually. That the jump from, I always like to say that if you look at the personal computer as an invention, it was a failure. It didn't make it all the way to the entire world, right? There's only about 1.5 billion PCs. There's already 6 billion mobile phones. There's depending on which numbers you look at, like 3 billion mobile smartphones, and so these markets that are coming online through mobile first are just completely different, and like the American way of thinking about the use cases is just completely wrong. And I always use the example of like a restaurant reservation or paying for something at a restaurant. Like in America, there's a computer in a box. There's like a wooden box at the front of the restaurant that has a computer in it where like the restaurant is run out of. You know, you go a lot of places in Asia and you've got iPads on the tables, you know, you don't even think about it through the lens of doing it with a computer first. You can think about it through the lens of mobile, and so it changes the entire, you know, structure of how you think about things. And this is, I don't know how to explain this to people because it's really hard to understand unless you go there and actually experience it.
It's without a question, it's something you have to, I remember my first trip to China, and you know, we were hosted by one of our Series A investors, W.I. Harper, fantastic group, and they took us on a tour of the world. And not just like all the fancy restaurants, but like, this is how cell phones are bought, this is what people do with them, this is how people interact with these things on a daily basis. And it opened our eyes, and it actually was a good lesson for us. We're like, oh, we have a lot to learn still. But it was a huge experience. Same thing when we came to India. We started off by going out and buying some cell phones, going to make transactions, trying to buy stuff on our phones and seeing how that goes. And it's amazing. And that's something I don't think you can learn over the internet. You can't learn over here. You've got to be out there and touch it, be in the dirt, to feel it. And I think, like you guys are on the ground in Indonesia, I think it's really important that if you're going to be a global company, don't kid yourself. You can't just hire someone that came, you know, a one transfer student. You're not going to, that's not how it works.
Yeah, no, I have this, I think, maybe contrarian opinion that innovation actually happens in Asia first and then comes to America. You know, the popular point of view is that everybody's copying us, you know, which I think is actually wrong. I think that, you know, what we see is that we see user experiences and ideas happening in Asia first and coming to America 18 months later. And
Do you think that's a recent phenomenon, or has that been going on and people just haven't understood that?
I don't know. You know, when I was at Facebook, it was a different game. We were playing, it was all based on the web. It wasn't mobile. You know, I started Path because I loved mobile. And I wanted to work on mobile, and so it's definitely playing out that way on mobile. And maybe it's because of the sheer numbers, right? You know, in China alone, you have an extraordinarily large user base. You also have extraordinary amounts of traffic, so you know, there's just more data. There's more opportunity for iteration. You have more density in cities, so you know, I think with density comes the ability to innovate. Which, you know, the reality is San Francisco is not a particularly dense city. There's probably a lot more opportunity to do innovation, especially from a social perspective in some of these markets. And you know, Jakarta has 20 million people, right? And so we spend a lot of time thinking about like, wow, it's a 20 million person city. It's just got a completely different dynamic than you can find, frankly, anywhere in America.
So I want to ask you briefly about your new app talk. It seems like the market that you've entered is a pretty crowded one. WhatsApp, WeChat, Kakao, Talk, Line, there's a whole bunch of players, and all of whom have pretty large established bases. Well, what niche are you trying to exploit that you, obviously you saw an opportunity that was still there despite all these players. What were you looking for?
Yeah, I mean, we started Path, like I said, our mission has always been to make social networking more personal. You know, we wanted to focus in on people's close friends and family, and our values are really focused around quality. And so we try to create a premium experience. And so if you go to Jakarta and you look at our numbers, you know, we have about 70% market share of the iPhone in Indonesia, which, you know, that's something you sort of look at that off the cuff and you say, well, oh, maybe that's, you know, that sounds pretty good, but it's Jakarta, right? The reality is that makes us, you know, a more premium sort of premium brand in the market. And so we have this ability to distribute new experiences because of the nature of our brand in the market. And so, you know, we made the decision that we had this messaging experience, which was sort of a secondary experience as a part of Path, and we wanted to break it out into its own application, mostly because our users kept saying to us, we really love this messaging experience that you guys have. Can you please make it into its own app, because I want it to be less clicks away from being able to use it. And we said exactly that. Why would we want to do that? There's no, you know, it's a very crowded space. There's a lot of people playing. And people said, well, we really love it and we want to use it. And so we decided to do it. And the way we think about it is that we sort of depend on our brand and this focus on quality to distribute the application. And our goal at Path has never been to be the biggest. We've always wanted to just be the highest quality. And so we've always thought about it that way. And so to us, the goal is not, massive, huge, distribution. It's more, we want to be in the hands of people who appreciate quality and want to make the choice to have, the Path experience in their life, because it's almost a lifestyle choice. And so we have that ability to do that in Indonesia in particular. And so, we took the opportunity to do it.
And do you think that then that is an interesting example of going from it's sort of the opposite in effect of the way you started, right? Starting with an app developed here and then spread to Indonesia and other markets in Asia. It sounds like you're starting. This is essentially originated with your user base in Indonesia.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the values have not changed. The vision hasn't changed geographically. We have this ability and opportunity to do this there now. We'll see where it goes in the future. But I think that as an entrepreneur and when you're building a new company, all you can do is react to your customers and try to serve them as best that you can. And this was our #1 request, and we wanted to do it at high quality. Frankly, I think we have a lot of work to do. It's a really hard market. It's very hard to make messaging reliable and differentiated, and to do things that are value add for users. And right now we're kind of at a baseline. We have some differentiating features. We have a ways to go on reliability. Our users are demanding a lot from us, so we have a lot of investment to do. But I think we're on the right track, and we're excited to make what we have on the roadmap come to reality.
Rebecca, how are we doing?
One last one.
Okay, well, I have a big one for you, Jacob. So, as you think about doing search in the deep web on mobile devices, there's an obvious giant in the room that you face that has offices in Mountain View and bikes that you can borrow. So, how do you think about effectively competing with Google, which has looked like an impenetrable competitor in the search market on mobile?
So, I think it's interesting. Every search company is obviously competitive with Google, and apparently Uber is now too. But I think Google's taken a very interesting approach on mobile. We all know that mobile phones are transactional devices. People want to do things with them. I think we see that Google's moving away from a search experience and becoming somewhat of an answer engine. That's an interesting approach. I think it has some interesting user elements that come with that. But I think that does start to stray away from the concept of search and choice. I think we've seen lots of companies go down the path of, I can give you all the world's answers according to me. We saw that back in the days of AOL. We've seen that in the past with other companies. I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in a market where there's constant evolution. I think applying the same matrix to every answer is not always the best way to go about it. And I think, especially when you start looking at the global market, I'll use a good example. The best place to find flights in India is going to be on Yatra. It's the facts. Or hotels. That's just the way it goes. And if you're not getting those results, you're not happy. I personally, the best place I find restaurants is in Yelp. I'm a Yelp guy. Some people are food spotting people. But it definitely wasn't Zagat. Right? And so that's an interesting reality when people are going to start finding that my best answer isn't there. The power of search is that you get to choose what your best answer is. You might click on the Fox News, the next guy might click on the CNN result. It may even be the same data, but I, for some reason, like that spin, right? And that's the reality of it. I think there's a huge opportunity in mobile. I think mobile is completely different than how we interact on the desktop web. I think if Google was starting tomorrow, they would have done things a little differently.
Yeah, the vertical opportunities are endless.
Yeah, so from our perspective, I think, obviously no one's going to poke the dragon, but things happen. I think things change. We obviously have taken money from people associated with Google in the past, and we feel that as a search perspective, there's a lot to happen in mobile. It may not all happen in the U.S. first, and I think we're on the bleeding edge of that opportunity.
You do have Eric Schmidt as an investor in the company. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.